Hi, I'm Quincas and I'm a synth DIY guy. Welcome to today's video, which is all about tilting, like the camera is tilting right now. In fact, it's about this new module by Joranalogue called the Pivot 2. So let me show you the module. This is Pivot 2 right here, right? And it's a 4 HP module. It's fairly small, but it can do a lot of really cool things. Basically, it's got two send and return pairs, an input and an output. There is a pivot knob and the pivot modulation input and a inverter. Basically, it's about signal routing. Joran noticed a disadvantage of the patch programmability of a modular system, which is if you want to change the routing, you can't normally do it with just switches. You have to unpatch, repatch. So the Pivot 2 is meant to allow you to have two different send and return paths that you can either route in series or inverted series or in parallel and anything in between. And it can also do other things as well. It can be a complementary dual VCA where one VCA goes up, the other one goes down, vice versa. You can use that as a voltage controlled crossfader. You can use it for stereo effects. There are many cool things that can be done with it that way. So let me quickly make a little voice that we can use to start testing what this thing does, right? So I think I'm going to do kind of a drone voice first, where we'll take output of my generate 3, we'll take the full output and we'll leave mostly fundamental for now, and that we're going to send to the input of the pivot over here. Then I will send 1 to the filter and send 2 to the folder, right? Filter 8 and fold 6, and we'll get those returns. So the output of the filter, I'm going to use low pass 4, put it on return 1, and the output of the folder, main output of the folder, will send it to return 2, and we'll take the output of pivot 2 to the output of my system, which I actually have to patch into my interface, and there it is. Okay, so now I can turn this up and we're already start hearing something. So let's turn this all the way to the left for now. And all the way to the left, we have the two processors in series, so filter and folder, right? So let's, it's grating sound, isn't it? Let's turn the pitch down a bit and the volume as well. Okay, now here's the folder, here's the filter. Now the filter's got resonance way high, so it was oscillating by itself. But we can kind of tell what the order is right now already, which is filter first followed by the folder. Right, cool. So let's say you're in the middle of your patch and you want to invert those. You can just do it by turning the pivot knob all the way to the right, and that's now crossed them over. So now this is the folder here, and you can tell that it's being filtered. And here you can open it up. Let's bring in a few more harmonics from generate 3. Cool. So it's a very different effect, right? This is folding first, filtering second. And this is, if I turn the pivot all the way to the left, we have filtering first followed by folding. It's going to be a brighter, harsher sound no matter what the filter setting is, because the folder will reintroduce harmonics, or introduce new harmonics rather, right? even if you have filtered most of the original harmonics out. What the folder does. Now, let's say you want them both happening in parallel. Well, that's the middle position of pivot 2. So now they're existing in parallel. You're doing parallel processing, where basically the signal is going into both the filter and the folder, and the outputs of both are being mixed together rather than one going into the other, right? And of course, any intermediary position of the pivot 2 will find, you know, combinations of these 3 basic routing options: parallel, series 1, and series 2, right? Now, let's make this a little more musical, a little more interesting by adding a sequence. I'm going to put that in volt per octave here. Let's create a clock with one of my contour ones. We'll use this one, put it in loop, and use the rise output as our clock. We'll send that to multiple, link 2, and we'll use that to trigger my second contour 1 as an envelope generator. Alright, and that, the output of pivot 2, we're actually going to send to a morph 4 VCA. VCA number 1 of morph 4, and then the output of that over to the system output, right? And now we will send that envelope output to the level input here of morph 4. Cool. Let's make the clock slower and the envelope longer. Then we'll trigger, we'll use the same clock to trigger step 8. Alright, let's make that a little faster. Right, so right now we have them running in parallel. Now I can send modulation to the pivot function. So why not the orbit 3 here, my double scroll chaos oscillator, send that to the pivot node. So now it's sweeping chaotically between the 3 main routing possibilities. And that's already creating interesting modulation in itself, right? Now if we add more modulation, like for example, we use generate 3 as an LFO and modulate the folding parameter. Now I'll use my select 2 as an attenuator for that, so I have some control over the depth of modulation. We'll send that into folding input here. And that's actually a good position for that knob. All the way would be a little too extreme, I think. It's cool too. It's something in the middle, I guess. There we go. Now we can take another output of generate 3, like maybe the even looks cool. Even wave output looks cool. We'll use that on the filter. Exponential input. Let's get a little more resonance in there. Right. Or we can use another output of the orbit 3 for that, for the filtering. Cool. Now we can change the polarity of that modulation by turning the attenuator all the way to the left instead of to the right. That's cool too. Make this slower. Or rather faster, but with a longer envelope, so it's almost not active. The PC is almost not active. That's cool. Now we can just play with those modulation speeds, amplitudes, change the sequence around. Right? That's super cool. If I change the pivot knob, that'll change the center from which modulation is taking place, right? It'll act as an offset. And you can find other interesting sounds that way. So here is going to emphasize more of the folding post, right? Filter, then folding. And here it's going to emphasize the opposite, folding, then filtering. In the middle, we'll go to both sides. If you're using a bipolar modulation source, which I am. If you were not, then you'd probably want to use the pivot as an offset to simulate that bipolar modulation. This is really cool. I like it. It's very nice, actually. Another really cool idea by Joranalogue. I'm loving my Joranalogue, by the way. The idea of sticking to one patching philosophy manufacturer would be very cool. I can also do that with Erica Synths and Faco and a bunch of other really awesome brands. I'm lucky man that way. Anyway, so that's, let's say, the original first intended use of this module. But one thing that can be really cool is, instead of using the returns, we'll take those returns from the modules themselves and send them in stereo to the output. So we'll be bypassing the VCA now and using, now we have one effect on one side and the other on the other, and filtering on the right, followed by let's remove the pivot modulation for now. So here we're basically listening to the folder. And here, the filter. Right, so folding is nothing, filter is what you hear. And over here, filtering does nothing, and what you hear is the folding. Now, this wave, a little harsh for the folder. Maybe we should use the core. That's cool. But then it'll be a little too bland for the filter. I guess I could use a separate output, but then I wouldn't be using the pivot, right? Let's sip of water here. So if I put pivot in the middle, I get them both, right? Left side filter, right side folder. Now, if I turn off compensation on the filter, the volumes will match a little better. That's cool there. Let's change up that sequence a little bit. Let's also make it different length. There's a 7/8 pattern now. This is super cool. And what the modulation we're hearing is the modulation that's going directly to the filter and the folder. We're not using the pivot modulation yet, right? Now, but that's gonna create an effect, like a panning effect, but it won't. It's not really panning. It's that dual VCA idea, right? Where, yeah, they're complementary VCAs and we're sending them to left and right, but they're different signals. One is coming from the filter and one is coming from the folder. Where's that cable? Here it is. We're going to use the Orbit 3 as modulation source for the pivot parameter. Maybe we should use the LFO for that. And fiddle around with the modulation amplitude and the pivot offset until you feel like you're getting the sound you want, more balanced. Just a little too much. There you go, this is sounding cool. Very cool. Slow down the pattern and the modulation. We swap these LFOs around. We get that slower triangle for the pivot parameter. Alright, so that's super cool too. Now, let me try another patch that I like to do, which is to use the pivot for modulation sources. So we can change the routing of some modulation sources as they go into their destination. So let me quickly unpatch and we'll patch the new idea. Alright. So now we're going to make a new patch and I'm going to use another really cool new module from Joranalogue. I'm going to make a full video about it later, delay 1. So stay tuned for that video. But right now, I'm not going to talk too much about it. I'm just going to use it to make a nice Karpus Strong physical modeling kind of a voice that we will use for this patch. So basically, let's do the clock trick again. So we use contour 1 as a clock. We'll send that to trigger contour 1. Actually, we'll send that to link 2 in order to split that clock signal. And we'll trigger the contour 1 again as an envelope. And we'll also trigger our sequencer again. Right, into the step input over here. The scan output now is the output of the voltages of the sequencer of the step 8. We're going to send that to the volt per octave input of delay 1 right here. And that's going to change the speed of the rate of the delay and therefore the pitch of the sound that we'll be getting out of here. We'll get the delay output into our main system output over there. This doesn't need a VCA because it's Karpus Strong. It has its own built-in decay, which is basically the feedback and damping. Right? Well, you'll see. It sounds really cool. And we also need to pluck it with something. We'll pluck it with the same clock that we're using to run the sequence. Actually, we'll use the output of contour 1 and see if that affects the sound at all. No, not on this input. This is the pluck input. It's not gonna react too much to changes in the envelope that I'm sending it. Now if I use the main input, then it does. See, a short envelope sounds quite different than a longer one. That can be very cool. But for now, let's use the pluck, because I really like the pluck input sound. Yeah, it's brighter unless you dampen it. There we go. This is nice. It's a pleasant sound. We'll make the variations very small. I think it sounds good with a narrow range of pitch change. Alright, okay, so now we can modulate stuff, right? For example, we can modulate the damping with orbit 3. Right, but we're going to use pivot 2. And we're going to send that modulation to 2 different destinations. So damping is one, and feedback is the other. So if I turn to the right now, we're modulating the feedback. Cool. So let's turn it to the left again. That's the damping. And this is the feedback. In the middle, we'll send it to both. So now as I modulate the pivot, we'll start modulating those sends, like where to which destination our orbit 3 is going. So we're going to use the generate 3 as an LFO into the pivot mod. Now let's make the whole thing a little faster. Very cool. Now why don't we also trigger the input, the normal input of the delay, the output from the envelope here. Super nice, right? So yeah, obviously there's a lot more you can do with this, and I do suggest you go check out Bree's video. He made a really long, very deep dive about this module with way more ideas than I just showed you here. This is just meant to be more of an introduction and just play around a little bit with the module, give you an idea, and I think it'll be good for today. So thanks for watching. See you soon, and stay noisy.